To Kill a Mockingbird, Chapter 2. This is the 10th video. Well, I'll read back from the beginning of the chapter, of the paragraph, because I had to stop in the middle of it. I mumbled that I was sorry and retired meditating upon my crime. I never deliberately learned to read, but somehow I had been wallowing illicitly in the daily papers. In the long hours of church, was it then I learned? I could not remember not being able to read hymns. Now that I was compelled to think about it, reading was something that just came to me, as learning to fasten the seat of my union suit without looking around, or achieving 2 bows from a snarl of shoelaces. Well, I have to ask you some questions before we continue, right? And of course, the most important question is, what is a union suit? Well, answer. Well, an union suit is something like an overall that usually it can be in 2 parts. The picture I put there in our Quizlet has both of the versions. I'm thinking mainly one that is 1 part from beginning to end, you know, so it's a suit you put and then you have the legs and you have the arms, you have the whole body, right? And then you close it, but maybe you have to go to the bathroom. Then there is a special door in the back part, right, where you can open and go to the bathroom. So, you know, we usually don't remember. For example, I don't remember when I had in my life I had to learn how to zip my pants, right? But I've learned it, and that was how natural reading was for our narrator. Look, I don't remember either when the exact moment I learned how to read, but differently from her, I know there was a period, I remember that period where I couldn't read, right? And I remember going to school. I remember having some trouble learning how to read, so I remember that period. It's not as natural as it is for her, you know? I remember, for example, having a reading test in front of the class. You know, the teacher would give us a book, very simple book, of course, and I would have to read that. So we were supposed to read, you know, at our chairs, at our desks there, and then read in front of the class. And I remember when I got the book in front of me, you know, I would just start creating the words in my mind, improvising the story, because, you know, it was too much pressure to read in front of people. It was kind of traumatic for me. And now basically my job here is to read, right? So, irony of destiny, right? Okay, so let's continue to new ground. I could not remember when the lines above Atticus's moving fingers separated into words, but I had stared at them all the evening in my memory, listening to the news of the day, bills to be enacted into laws, the diaries of Lorenzo Dow, anything Atticus happened to be reading when I crawled into his lap every night. You got the scene, right? So the father would be there reading something, you know, with the finger, you know, below the lines, and our narrator would be there following the fingers. And because she's extremely smart, we know that she's not a normal kid, right? Because she's extremely smart, then she just caught it, right? She just, as you would, I don't know, you look somebody dancing. I don't know if dancing is a good example because I don't know how to dance, but I don't know, you see a person playing and then you start playing with them, and then that's it. That's how she learned. Something we've never discussed is why she calls her father Atticus. I don't have an answer for that. If you do, please tell me. Well, but let's just focus a little bit on what the father would be reading, okay? So, bills to be enacted into laws. So keep in mind, when you want to make a law, first you have a bill, right? I'm going to read the definition for bill here for you. What is bill? A proposed law presented to a legislative body for consideration, okay? So I am a senator or any kind of deputy or a people's representative, right? And then I want to make a law, but first I make a bill. If my bill passes, then my bill is enacted, right? And then of course the past of that, enacted. And then it becomes a law, all right? Take a look, I put the definition of enact in our Quizlet. Enact is to make legal or official, all right? So bills to be enacted into laws. And then we have this Lorenzo Dow, which was a real guy, all right? I'm going to read the definition, then we talk a little bit about him. A fury, like fierce, full of, energy, right? So it's a fury itinerant Methodist preacher of the eastern and southern United States. Remember that, I don't know, depending on your religion, if you are a Catholic or if you are one of those, I don't know, maybe 90% of our population who are not actually religious, right? They don't have any religion, even though sometimes you go to church. So if you are one of those, you don't know exactly what it feels like, being familiar with, an itinerant preacher. But if you are a Protestant, for example, here in Brazil, and if you are a more traditionalist Protestant, I mean, you go to church all the time, you will be familiar with the great preachers of the moment. I remember when I was a teenager, I was a pretty how can I say, a pretty faithful church goer. I would go to church, I don't know, 7-8 times a week. And of course we always heard of the great preachers who would go to the great congresses, and because I was part of a Pentecostal church, we would be talking about those guys that brought tears to people's eyes and things like that. Well, here in Brazil, we don't have that long tradition of something like that, right? First, because we are mainly a Catholic, quote unquote, nation, and second, because we have a lot of different denominations, different churches. So a great preacher, let's say in Assembleia de Deus, will not be known a lot by Quadrangular or Batista or even Universal, Reino de Deus, and things like that, right? But keep in mind that for Americans, since, I hope I'm not forgetting his name, Jesus, there is a very important preacher. He made a very important sermon in the United States called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. It's not difficult for me to recover that information, but I wanted to get it without looking at the book. This is part of our teacher's course here at CCE. His name is... Oh, Jesus, I can't believe I forgot his name. No, I'll have to check. I give up, okay? Look how lucky I am. Sinners in the hands of an angry God. Of course, Jonathan Edwards, okay? So as early as the mid-18th century, you have, I would say as early as the beginning of the United States, you have those great preachers, that have a powerful speech, that make people regret for their wrongdoings, and then there are hundreds of people converting to Christ, and people crying, and miracles, and etc. Right? This is part of their tradition, and it's important, very important, for you to understand that, right? So remember, gospel music, right? Elvis, for example, never stopped composing Christian music. He was a Protestant, right? And there is this sense of church and etc. So keep that in mind. Just for you to get a notion what. And then, of course, I think after Jonathan Edwards, people, I don't know, because Jonathan Edwards was the guy who would bring crowds and crowds to the Lord, would make people cry, regret their sins, and etc. Of course, there is this echo in the mind of a churchgoer, American churchgoer, right? So I don't want to be too digressive, but just for you to get a little taste of how the speech would sound. Let me see if I could get a part of... Look, the beginning of the part we have here in the CC material. The God that holds you over the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire, abhors you, and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burn like fire. He holds you. I'm lost here. Oh, he looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into the fire. He is of purer eyes than to bear to have you in his sight. You are 10,000 times so abominable in his eyes as the most hateful, venomous serpent in ours. You have offended him infinitely, more than ever a stubborn rebel did his prince. And yet it is nothing but his hand that holds you from falling into the fire every moment. And then he continues. So this kind of speech you would hear, from a preacher like that. And then, of course, we understand much better this adjective, right? A fury preacher. Okay. Just to go a little bit further into the history of the United States, remember that when we are talking about New England, right? We're talking about people who left England because they wanted to have a free place where they could follow their religion, right? And who were those guys? They were the Quakers, right? Why do we call the Quakers the Quakers? What is earthquake? Earthquake is when the ground shakes, right? So they were called the Quakers because when the power of God, filled them, they would quake, with emotion, with, the Spirit, the Holy Ghost, with the experience there. So, the more traditional, the more religious you are, the more connected with that tradition you will be. Okay? Well, let's continue. So that's why the diaries of Lorenzo Dow would be published on the newspaper. Right? Anything Atticus happened to be reading when I crawled into his lap every night. Until I feared I would lose it, I never loved to read. One does not love breathing. That's a nice sentence, right? Can you explain that to me? Answer? Well, I guess the answer would be we do a lot of things that are very important, right? Think about a happy couple, right? They're together and they spend, I don't know, 20, 30 years together, and 40, 50, you know, and for years they don't think of each other like, oh, I'm thinking about that person. It's natural for them. They're so close to each other. It's so present that you know, it's easy to forget you were there, you know, seeing the person. The idea is the fish doesn't pay attention to the water he's swimming in. All right, so that's the idea, right? So breathing is so natural, you know. Water is so common to fish. Fish is not all the time thinking, oh my god, there's water around me, oh my god, so much water, you know. What is very present is difficult to perceive. Keep in mind that that's a very important truth, right? Things that are very far and things that are very close, things that are absent and things that are too much present are difficult to see. You know, the two extremes are difficult to see. And that was her relation with reading.